morning and welcome to a very special edition of Dive In with Captain Sean. I know I promised a video on the best breeds for boats, and that one is coming up in just a couple of weeks. We'll have a really special guest for that on Instagram. I hope you've been following the adventures of the Daily Bailey, a Dalmatian doing the Great Loop. But why are we here today? Well, we're here today to talk about the Asteria and the fact that she is a two-time Boat International Voyager Award. I was fortunate enough to be a captain on one of those Boat International Voyager Award runs a few years ago. But recently, we took home the great Neptune. Took home the Neptune again. This time from literally going from pole to pole. So what exactly is the Boat International Voyager Award, or what are the Boat International Awards in general? Really, it's the benchmark for excellence within our industry. Every year they have a big event. It's in this year. It was in Florence, Italy. You can go on Boat International's website, see the highlights for that. All over the next couple of weeks and months, I'll be posting snippets from that awards ceremony. But it is, it's everything that's good about this industry, whether it's design, the excellence that goes behind these things. It's the people that are really behind the people that own these vessels, and rightfully so. They're rewarded with these great rewards. Now, the Voyager Award is a little special. It's near and dear to my heart. It is what one does after they buy these extraordinary vessels, or they're lucky enough to charter one of these great boats. Now, the first time that I won a Voyager Award, it was for going to the Northwest Passage twice, and I've done videos on that about latitude and such. And there's the Neptune. But then I was fortunate enough to go on board Asteria, and I split that with Tangway Anderson. He was the captain that really did most of over across the South Pacific and then into Costa Rica. I took it from Mexico all the way up to Alaska, and we were part of the Voyage Award for that run. This year, they won, like I said, from the North Pole to the South Pole, Svalbard, all the way to Antarctica. And I'm lucky enough to have two very special guests, both captains that are currently on board Asteria, Captain Pavlos and Captain Ian. I'll bring them to the stage in just a second. Before we go, though, I always like to say thank you very much for the people that have come on to the videos, done special things, or sponsor Westy Sunglasses. If you are looking for a unique pair of sunglasses that are some of the best glasses in the world, Westy Sunglasses, look them up. They're really great. And of course, Wendy Cohen, who did a video with us, Image Optics. She places eyewear in most of the films you've seen in the past quarter century. Though she was pretty young, makes her sound old. She's not that old. Well, actually, I guess she would have to be. But anyway, Heather Kearsley from Kearsley Linens, and all the other great special guests that I've had on board. But anyway, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Let's bring on Captain Pavlos and Captain Ian, who are both this second on board Asteria, which is currently in Cape Town. Pavlos, Ian,
Good evening, Captain
Ian.
Thank you for inviting us tonight.
How are you?
Great. Just came on board Asteria today for my next stint to give Captain Ian some very much deserved time off, and ready for the next adventure.
Fantastic. So Pavlos, let's jump right in. So you joined the boat in your home country of Greece.
Correct. Yeah. So I joined the boat straight from the start of the dry dock. We stayed almost 7 months in Greece, going into full refit mode to get the boat ready to the standards required to cruise in these extreme environments, in a full commercial certification. After that, we went, we started the crossing initially to Norway. We cruised there for a few months, even did some
So
charters.
let's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So back up. So tell us, there's industry people in here, but there's also people that don't know what is significant about full commercial certification. What does that mean for Asteria specifically?
So for Asteria, it pretty much means that to be able to charter your boat, uh, pretty much without any restrictions. And for an older lady like Asteria, a proven explorer yacht, in order to do something like that, you need to overcome a lot of challenges, mainly structural challenges, things that would come with the boat. In the past, these regulations changed throughout the years. So, in order to make a boat today commercial, you need to comply with today's regulations, and that poses a lot of challenges. But it was a tough mission, but today we are
But
absolutely full commercial and operated in the most extreme environments.
also got brand new paint job while she was there as well. So
Yeah,
she's
of
looking
course,
extra
that's also
shiny.
extremely important. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's yeah,
Uh,
we just care if she looks shiny. So she looks the interior exterior looks great. Now, Ian, tell us a little
Absolutely.
bit about yourself. You joined us recently in Rio, and we'll talk a little bit about more your voyages when in a bit. But tell us about yourself.
Me, I've been in the industry for many years. Started off in sailboats. I've done some explorer stuff before on other vessels, South Pacific, this sort of thing. And it's something that just attracted me. When I got the phone call, was I interested in this particular vessel? I'd actually known it from when it did the Northwest Passage back in 2016, I think it was. A friend was on board, so I was more than happy to jump on board, having known Asteria, even though it was quite a few years ago.
Well, that's good. So Pavlos, tell us about like when you were up in Svalbard. Tell us. Svalbard's one of my favorite places on the planet. The tell us a little bit about that, and basically your voyage from Greece to Svalbard.
Okay. So as I was saying previously, we didn't go straight to Svalbard. First, we went into Norway to test the waters, make sure everything is solid, do also some charters, and then we started the crossing to Svalbard. Now, when it comes to Svalbard, I would say there are a few peculiarities there. First and foremost, obviously, provisions, fuel, etc. All this is something that you need to have in advance, ideally. From maybe your last port of call in North Norway can be Tromsø. Of course, nowadays there are quite a few of provisions as well in Svalbard, but especially for fuel, if you want to avoid being delivered with a tanker and so on, these are things you have to do in advance. But the most important part in Svalbard is getting the crew ready to be able to respond in a polar environment where there are no second chances. If someone falls off a zodiac, it's a completely different story for this to happen in the Med, and completely different story for this to happen in an environment where, apart from maybe 5 degrees or 3 degrees Celsius of water temperature, you also got a sporadic polar bear that might pop
But
up at any time.
that didn't stop you guys from doing a polar plunge up there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a tradition.
Yeah, but you don't want to stay in the water too long. I remember when I was in Asteria in Greenland, it was which is Greenland again, another amazing place that Asteria has been to. Yeah, we all the precautions that you had taken that you'd take up on Svalbard, we also had there. Now, Ian, have you spent time in any of the polar latitudes?
No, only down in southern Chile for a period, but unfortunately my rotation didn't work that we went down across. So, obviously having rotation is great, but sometimes you do miss out on some of these spectacular areas. But, some you win, some you lose, I guess.
So tell us. So that actually leads a good question. Now, what exactly? Now, there's two captains on board Asteria. Now, you guys rotate every what?
We do every 3 months. It's actually quite rare because our rotation crossover is normally only 24, 48 hours. So it's pretty much full on, but we are heavily involved in the boat when we're not working. So it's more of the formalities of handing over. And then obviously things like this, Sean, with you, we'll be able to actually sit down. I'm actually down in the dining room at the moment, and Pavlos is up in the bridge. But that's purely for logistics at the moment. Normally we'd be together in the bridge.
Now that picture behind Pavlos is really cool. That was Asteria when she was originally a tug, a rescue tug, which is how she started her life. Actually built in Greece in 1969.
Yeah, she was not just your ordinary tug that pushes boats around. She was actually a Mediterranean-based rescue tug for 30 years, going out in serious conditions and rescuing boats. And then she was converted, I think, in 2000 in New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's actually where she did the second refit on her as well. When she was reconverted, they redid the interior and everything, and she's got a great interior on board. Super comfortable boat. A lot of great living spaces. You're in the dining room, Ian, but you've got that just aft of you. You've got that great kind of movie lounge area, and then up top you've got the sky lounge, and then aft there's that great aft dining area. Up top where you keep all the toys, you've got well, actually tell us a little bit about the toys you've got on board.
Well, I mean, we got a variety. We're actually just upgrading our Zodiacs, which obviously is an important part of the exploration boat. We've actually got 5 tenders on board, two sailing dinghies, 2 jet skis, sea bobs, this sort of stuff. The usual toys you'd have on a charter boat, but they're a little bit more orientated towards exploration. For example, our Zodiacs are working horses. They're working tools to get places.
Yeah, no, I like the Northwind. I've actually gone through some really a lot of heavy brash ice with that boat, and she handled it really well. And I think that's a fun boat to drive, that one. Pavlos, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Even though predominantly in the polar areas, our first choice would be the Zodiacs. But if we ever have to go on a more remote expedition, absolutely, Northwind with its enclosed cabin offers a lot of comfort.
So now, tell us a little bit about the voyage, Pavlos, that you took all the way down to Antarctica, and the Drake Passage, in a bit of that.
Absolutely. So first, as you know already, we spent almost a month in Svalbard doing 2 circumnavigations, pretty much seeing everything there. And then our first port of call would be Bergen in Norway in order to refuel and get some paperwork ready. Then we went on to London, where we had some events on board. The boat was actually next to the Tower Bridge.
I know, I was there.
Yeah, and after that, we did some minor regular repairs and started a crossing from the Atlantic, taking us to New York. Now that's around October. Another cruising there, going towards New England.
I've got to give a shout out to the New York Explorers Club. A lot of members have tuned in today. Amazing organization. They've been a follower of Asteria, and there were several members of the New York Explorers Club that were on board. Actually been on board twice. The first time we were in New York, again, a few years ago, and then this time we've always, the owner of Asteria has always been kind to the New York Explorers Club, letting us have some events on board the boat. And we've got to give a little bit of shout out to the owner of Asteria for putting for kind of having the grander vision of what can we do with the boat. And we are a full charter vessel, and the but he likes to, so if we can go to an interesting area of the world and then charter, then he can join it. It's a win-win. And so thanks to the owner that allows us to go to these unique places, because a lot of owners, they want to use their boat like in the Caribbean or in much more traditional areas, and he's not like that. He likes to push those boundaries. But what's also cool with these boats, with Asteria, pardon me, is that it allows the guests on these charters to also go to these unique areas of the world, and you've both the guests in that were in Svalbard and in Antarctica, in a small part, share in this last Voyager award, and I hope that they feel proud that they were part of their voyages. But anyway, not to go there. So anyway, so down to Antarctica. Tell us about the Drake Passage.
Okay, so down to Antarctica, obviously after, of course, New York, we started a long way down, as you mentioned before, and we had to stop to a couple ports to reprovision, etc. And our first port of call when we started, let's say, the Antarctic journey was actually Stanley in the Falkland Islands. And because of that, and because our next destination was actually South Georgia, we didn't have to cross the Drake Pass at straight on, as it's normally done, let's say from Ushuaia straight to the Antarctic Peninsula. So we did what we call an inverse Shackleton voyage. We went straight to South Georgia, where the only thing I can say about this place is it's literally the Serengeti of the Southern Ocean. If you have ever seen Galapagos and you would like to see them in an Arctic setting, this is absolutely the place. There are no people on board the entire island, apart from maybe 5 million penguins and 5 or 10 scientists. And after paying our respects as well to the grave of Shackleton, which is there in the port of Grytviken, we did our passage from South Georgia to the first, let's say, a part of the continent, which is actually the Elephant Island, which is the place from where the famous rescue story of Shackleton started. So our first stop after South Georgia is Elephant Island. We go there, and suddenly you start to see these towering icebergs coming, and you start to understand that now you are in Antarctica. So, because actually South Georgia is not inside the polar circle, it is inside the Antarctic convergence zone, which pretty much means that suddenly the water gets way more cool, the temperature changes, and there is a possibility of ice, but you're not gonna have the all that Weddell sea ice that just gets all around the peninsula. So we go to the Elephant Island, and then from the Elephant Island, we start exploring the peninsula. It's like a 12-hour voyage from Elephant Island, and then there are the various the small islands that you can see, and then go more south to the peninsula. And pretty much you're doing like a circumnavigation, and then going back
Now,
to
the
King
the wild
George.
is the wildlife like around there. See, like a lot of bird life, but penguins, whales, orcas. What did you see?
So for sure, I did not see any bears, thank God, in
No polar
Antarctica.
bears. Okay.
Yeah, no polar bears there. So there's no requirement for armed guards and etc., as is the requirement in Svalbard, which is one of the
Yeah.
additional things someone has to bear in mind. The difference in Antarctica, let's say I'll talk about wildlife. Uh, I think because of the ice, there is a lot of more not dramatic, a very specific landscape. So if I were to compare, the only place where I could say it's similar to Antarctica when it comes to comparing Svalbard, since you mentioned it, would be if you go more like a 2 days voyage north of Svalbard and go to the North Polar ice pack, where you just see all the sea ice around, and it's just an endless sea of sea ice. So if you go to Antarctica, you see also sea ice, and you also see these towering icebergs. And on those icebergs and ice, you start to see also a lot of life. Whereas on the North Polar ice pack, it's barren. It's very, very few animals there. But in Antarctica, it's a completely different story. You're gonna see whales feeding. I mean, I don't exactly remember the place, but I remember specifically this image where we were in the middle of a gyre inside the peninsula, and there was like hundreds of penguins, a few whales feeding, and even some seals coming up, and it was such, and everything was like turning along on the ice, and it was it's a very interesting spectacle. And what makes it even more interesting is how the weather changes extremely dramatically. In Svalbard, the main thing that changes is suddenly you might have fog, let's say, but most of it, the bad weather conditions you can predict. But in Antarctica, it's a completely different ball game. So I am seeing all of this with the perspective as a navigator. So it's an unbelievable experience.
But what's also interesting about the jobs that we all have is like, yeah, not only do you have to navigate through all that, but you're also running uh, a world class restaurant and floating hotel
Yeah,
too, and make sure that the guests are always that are engaged and having fun as well too. A lot of the pictures that I've seen from your Antarctica, you've got people on ice floes and checking that out, and then in kayaks and then utilizing the water in ways that people say it's cold, but again, it's like there's no such thing as bad weather, but just bad clothing or bad equipment. And Asteria is fortunate to have a lot of good gear on board that allowed the guests to get in and really experience that landscape and the natural beauty up close and firsthand. One little mention that you should have is that a big part of these charters is obviously the food on board, and we got to give a little shout out to Bibi because I know she's watching,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and she was a big part of making the charters that you had a success. So Bibi, if you're watching, a little shout out to you there. If you decide to charter Asteria, you'll be in for a treat. So anyway, so I want to get into the rest of the part of the voyages that we're talking about, but any so any final words on Antarctica before we get into what Ian's story is, which is really interesting. He went to a pretty cool place too, which I want to talk about. But Pavlos, any final thoughts on Antarctica or chartering in Antarctica? Or actually, is anyone out in the? I know we've got quite actually a few people that are watching the stream right now. Do you guys have any questions out there, especially like how do we get to Antarctica? Like, I mean, we can talk about the planes there, or a little more specifically talk about provisioning. So any questions that you have, I'd love to hear that. But Pavlos, wrap up Antarctica for us.
Okay, absolutely. So, my thoughts would be I feel blessed I had the ability to visit South Georgia, and I would absolutely recommend on someone doing a similar trip to visit South Georgia as well, because it offers a completely different experience, especially putting the historic element, like repeating an expedition and etc. Somebody who is doing something like that needs to absolutely be prepared to do some sea time. It's not like you're arriving somewhere within 12 hours and etc. Maybe when you're in the peninsula, you can do something like that. Hopefully, as you mentioned before, there is an easy way in and out. On King George Island, there is the only airport that is able to be operated from Chile to King George Island. And I think they also do charter flights as well. I would say it's having lived both experiences, Svalbard and Antarctica plus South Georgia. I would say that Antarctica and South Georgia is just on a different level. Yes, in terms of difficulty, but for us as the team on board, but at the same time, they offer something that you cannot see anywhere else in the world. And that for itself is something that I just feel extremely blessed to
Well,
have been part of this expedition.
well, great final word. Also, too, the it's it was a team effort, I believe. Like on in and art, like up in Svalbard, we had Polaris on board. Antarctica, it was EOS,
EU. Yeah.
and the two great organizations. And in like and having the right guides on board is also critical for success. Again, really great organizations. Like I don't want to say play favorites, but there's also we've got also Cookson Adventures too, which is really good. Of course, Jason Roberts up in Svalbard as well is a close friend of mine, and Polar X. All great companies, people that are really, really passionate about the environments that they take other people into. So, all right. So now let's continue on with the voyage. You leave Antarctica and you head to Rio de Janeiro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
we head to Rio for
this is
fueling
where,
and
and this
etc.
is what now enters Captain Ian.
Okay.
Well,
So
yeah,
what-
no, Paolo's very kindly brought the boat up to Rio, which is another, another spot in itself. And then obviously we were basically there for fueling, because the next leg we were planning on doing was an actual expedition across to St. Helena to pick up guests and then head down to Tristan da Cunha and across eventually to Cape Town.
So I'm just going to bring this little video real quick. It's a quick one, but it will basically tell you where we were going. It's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's right here in the middle bit. That is into St. Helena, which is actually an interesting history. That's where Napoleon was exiled, and the islands that you went to were also, I think, some of the names on them. You got Inaccessible Island. You could go talk to us a little bit about that in a second, and then of course, this is what these islands look like. Ian, so tell us a little bit about your journey to these islands.
Well, we was quite lucky. Both Pavlos and I together, we took the boat across to St. Helena. Just for an example, that's classed as being quite civilized, even though it's in the middle of the Atlantic. It does have an airport, but we were still waiting for the delivery ship to be able to dock and the fuel ship to be able to dock. And they'd been waiting for at least, I think, 8 days before we got there, because it wasn't able to dock on the little port they had there. Then subsequently, our guests were even delayed by a day before we left. So the logistics of even getting to somewhere with an airport, that again, as we've talked about, the provisioning is basically non-existent there. So everything had to be done in Rio before. We managed to pick up a little bit of goods on the way there. But then obviously our guests arrived and we started to head down to Tristan da Cunha, which is I think it was a six days steaming straight south. So you're literally heading back to Pavlo's hometown back in Antarctica. It's not as far south, of course, but we got down there. The weather we were very lucky with, because this time of year, or the time we were doing it, the weather can be very, very changeable. You have to be very careful on the conditions, because one, safe to the vessel, but you've also got guests on board and you want to keep people happy.
Yeah, that was when we planned this charter well in advance, and we explained to the guy that chartered it. This is the second time, by the way, he's chartered Asteria, that it was a bit of a moonshot, and we'd be lucky maybe to get one or two of the destinations that he wanted to go to. But Ian, you pulled them all off.
Well, I was actually very lucky because they were delayed a day. So that delayed us getting down to Tristan da Cunha by a day. And then, as you said, I mean, you can tell by the name of Inaccessible. That was the idea. That's where he wanted to go. So we got to Tristan Cunha in the morning. We got them ashore there. Then we took the guides and the Zodiacs with us down to Nightingale, which is an experience in itself. They explore that. But then we actually managed to get across to Inaccessible. Now, the main guide that came with us that took them ashore has only managed to get across in his lifetime, I think, 4 times. So we were, the stars just aligned. We actually hit it. We had the 12-hour window of that day to be able to get those 2 islands in. And then, of course, you're not just finished then. You've then got another 5 days steaming across to Cape Town. So it's, it's a very different sort of charter or expedition to the normal run-of-the-mill charter you do. But this is what Asteria does. You've got 6 days of motoring just to make those 12 hours happen, getting across to the islands.
Yeah, and I did. So, Ian, I mean, like, technically, you weren't part of this last Voyager award, but I can definitely see Asteria possibly up for a third. Which,
well, that's certainly what the owner's hoping, and it's certainly what Pavlos and I are aiming at the moment. Obviously, our next destination, the plan for the vessel is to head into Southeast Asia, and that's a whole adventure in itself.
Well, that's a great segue in to talk about. So the boat right now is in Cape Town, and the boat's currently available for charter in Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, in that area. I did a program on chartering those areas with Will Jones from Journeys by Design. Will's been in Africa for a long, long time. Probably one of the most knowledgeable African guides I've about not just particular areas of Africa, but all of Africa. Super, super knowledgeable guy. You can catch that video also on the Worth Avenue Yachts YouTube channel. Super interesting. But that we're looking at. I know that we've all been discussing kind of itineraries for the next couple of months. And just again, like like Madagascar, just if we just wind up doing Madagascar, it's a large amount of cruising, but there's a bunch of interesting stuff in there. There's a couple of dive sites that I've identified. I'm sure that you guys have been studying that chart as well, looking for some cool places. And of course, don't forget Madagascar has lemurs. So,
Yeah, that's the thing about these explorations. It's not just about the coastal areas. It's actually getting ashore and exploring inland as well. So, yeah. It's not your white boat run-of-the-mill vacation. We do work as hard as we can to make it work for what the guests want. And quite often they've got this dream of this adventure, but it's up to us to make the logistics, and with the companies that you've mentioned before, actually make it happen. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, just in provisioning, equipment, navigation, charts, everything, in just making these things happen. And if we can make it happen seamlessly, quite often we're very much like a swan. On the surface, it's all smooth and calm. Underneath, we can be paddling sometimes.
That's just when I just look at you, Ian. I think swan-like. That's
swan-like. Yeah.
It's and that was, I think, in evidence to. I mean, you guys would never say it, but I'll say it. Is like you both were the gratuities that were left by the charters over the two charters, the couple charters that you did were definitely reflections of the great job that you really did. And I know both of you don't do it for that. You do it just because that's what you do, and you're true professionals. And but they were, I hear the complaints, and I hear the praise, and I got no complaints on either one of you guys on board. Nothing but praise. You really pulled off some fantastic charters in some of the most inaccessible, literally, places on the planet. And I'm sure that coming up, for Africa, you're gonna kill it there. Again, I've been talking a lot, talking to Will Jones, talking to Cookson, but combining some great inland trips like via helicopter, like the Asteria isn't full heliops, but we can land a helicopter quite close to the boat and then get inland and do some really neat stuff. And then from there, we're also looking at the Seychelles, the Maldives, and then into, and then even the charter that went to Inaccessible and Tristan da Cunha is talking about doing the Andamans, which would be fascinating. You need special permits just to go there. There are tribes on the Andamans that haven't, you have to get a permit to see them because they're still literally living back in the Stone Age. And that's the type of cool stuff that you guys are going to get to see and visit these places that, are literally right out of movies. It's just all exciting stuff, any final words before we wrap it up? I know, Pavlos, you just got in, and Ian, you'll be flying home after a well-deserved break. Why don't we hear from you, Pavlos, first, and then Ian? Any final words?
From my side, I just want to say that before I joined the boat, the owner had told me that Asteria is going to visit places that few people ever see, and somehow it all happened, and today we are literally seeing all these places, and it's amazing to share that experience, not just by ourselves, but also with the people that come on board, whether it's the owner, whether it's charter guests. It just creates moments that are extremely specific and something that can be remembered, at least for me personally, until the end of my career, for sure.
And then Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the team behind us. I mean, it's obviously, as being a captain, Sean, ultimately the responsibility stops with us. But we managed to do it because of the team we have behind us, whether it's the crew on the boat, the support we have from suppliers, from manufacturers, the support from the owner. It's a team effort. I mean, obviously, that's a big thank you to them, really. That's what makes this so enjoyable. The crew, we enjoy these places as much as the guests, even though we're working, it is an experience of a lifetime.
Well,
Absolutely.
we're at Worth Avenue. We're 100% behind you, and we're dedicated to putting you in those amazing places. And it's great to be the charter manager on board. Continually finding new and interesting places for you to go to, even though sometimes if I throw out a suggestion, you're like, that sounds a little crazy.
Wow.
But anyway, so anyway, we'll wrap it up. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Stay with me backstage when we sign off. Thank you very much. Any final words? Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you, Fiona. Thank you, everyone else that's out there. I'm looking at all now. Of course, now I get 100 different comments coming in. But anyway, thank you, everyone that's out there. We're going to continue reporting on the adventures of Asteria. If you want to find out more of the great places that you can charter, contact me, Sean, at worthavenueyachts.com, or any of us at Worth Avenue Yachts. I'd be happy to put you in touch with any of the captains on board. Again, thank you very much to the owner of Asteria that allows us to go to these great, wonderful places and then come and talk with them. We'll see you next time on Diving with Captain Sean, which we'll be definitely talking about the best breeds for boats. You guys tune in so you'll know what dog to bring on board. Anyway, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.